Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you come back for the next episode covering the points of this conversation.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding @Prestigious_Pod.
Follow me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
Follow me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
Join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions.
And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, on one of my social media platforms, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousInitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website. This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Kent, and here with me is Chris Bean. Hello, Mr. Bean.
Hello, sir.
I'm thrilled to also have us joining us today. We're going to have a captivating discussion on the cutting edge world of financial technology, or Fintech. Our guest today is Andres Klaric, co-founder of Fuse, a startup that's making waves in the lending industry. Andres, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Chris and Chris.
So, Andres, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what brought you to where you are today as being part of this Fuse company?
Well, I'm born in Tennessee, raised my entire life in Bolivia. I come from a family that has been in the auto space for a while. My grandfather was a race car driver, and my dad has worked in auto finance for a good chunk of his career. And my first job at a high school was selling cars. I helped my parents pay for schools, working at a dealership. And then went into Wall Street, worked as a banker, and afterwards kind of transitioned into like the investing roles. Along the way, I had the chance to go to business school, to HBS, Harvard Business School. That's where I met my co-founder almost 9 years ago. We stayed in touch. I went back into the investing world, and as the pandemic began, I started like kind of noodling with a couple of potential things to do. And reach out to this classmate of mine with my co-founder. Started to think about a couple of ideas, and we first landed on the opportunity to build an automated lending process for car loans, and that's kind of in line with the onset of my career and the family links there. But we quickly realized that like beyond the marketing and the technology we had built, there was an opportunity to, instead of like selling loans, to actually sell technology to the partners that we were serving. So we went from direct to consumer to an actual business to business operation. We raised over like millions of dollars of capital afterwards. We're working with top 10 credit unions, finance companies, and banks. That's kind of like the quick story on us, and how we got where we are today.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear, especially how, you have kind of a background in cars and automotive, and that really kind of trended through the whole, arc that you took into getting where you are. And I'm just kind of curious, I'm sure growing up around some of that stuff, you either loved or hated it. And so which one is it, and is it still part of your life?
I know I love cars. I mean, I think planes and cars are kind of like my childhood hobby, and like just something that has kind of followed me through the rest of my life. I liked Formula One before Drive to Survive. So, and just the automotive space has always been like close to my heart. And I think like the finance side of things, being the son of immigrants, I think like I always associated financial institutions with like good stuff. Like the way that I see it is like, I remember going to the bank to get the money that that my dad will be sending back from the US to Bolivia, and just helping financial institutions being more efficient, giving people more access to credit, and all of the benefits that come with it is something that like I love being part of. So obviously each one wants to make their impact on their own way, and for me, it's kind of making credit markets a little bit more efficient every day.
For sure, yeah, it definitely sounds like you're kind of making moves there. And so, we've talked about it a little bit already, but can you kind of explain or give us a brief introduction of your work with Fuse, and
Yeah.
kind of what your driving mission is, and what the goal is with that company?
Yeah, and our obsession is automating as much as possible the credit process, right? And like ensuring that people get as fast as possible in the most cost efficient way a yes or no answer, right? Like not living in limbo. And that comes through like two channels. It's either automating and making like the process for verification much better. The way that like the product or what the way that our product works is essentially an orchestration layer. Right? Like it's just it's a source of truth that where like the process of applying for a loan, the process of being approved or denied a loan is kind of like processed, and you connect to a bunch of like data providers, right? You need to run credit, you need to check fraud, you need to check income verification, you need to do employment verification, you need to value the assets if it's like a home or an auto or like if it's an asset-backed loan. If it's a business, you need to check it that they have the proper licenses or that they file taxes. So all of that needs to happen in seconds, right? Right? In such a way that you can come back to the response to that business owner or that borrower and tell them, hey, like you're approved, here's your rate, this is the optionality and the array of credit terms that we can give you, right? And show as much flexibility as possible with that borrower so that first they know what they're getting, but also that they are if you the faster you get to them, the sooner they're probably going to pick you as an opportunity. So like conversion is a huge component of it. Last but not least is the process of actually once the person says yes to the loan, the process of actually uh, double checking all of it before the loan gets funded in the account, or if it's like a credit line, the credit line is officially approved by the lender.
Okay. So it sounds like you're just trying to streamline or make that process a little more efficient for not only
Exactly.
the, everyday person, but the businesses too, right?
Yeah, it's both of them, right? Like it's really for me the way that I think about it, it's efficiency drives profitability for the lender. Profitability ultimately means that marginal borrower is going to get a yes, right? Like because if the lenders operate at a much better clip, that means that you can see it from the Milton Friedman approach. Like if shareholders are better off, but also shareholders realize that like if the machine works well, they're going to reinvest in that, and naturally like that borrower that today is being told no, it's going to have a much better chance to being told getting that approval in the future. That business owner, that person going to college, it's really like a flywheel of what efficiency brings to the lending process.
Right. It's really cool to see your vision for that and how that helps to kind of work in that
Yeah.
process, like I said, to benefit both parties. So that's really cool. And then, I've done a little bit of research into you and your company, and I've seen that along the way you've had to, make some successful or sometimes in the moment you had to make some pivots and
Yeah.
make decisions and turn down offers and accept other offers and things like that, which is a huge part of business and oftentimes life. So I'm wondering if you can just share with us, maybe some of the challenges you
Yeah.
faced and how you've decided what to do and how they've kind of shaped where you're going with Fuse.
Yeah, I think like earlier in your life, you're trying to build as much optionality as possible. And I think as you get older, you realize that like you get paid to make decisions, and either at work or like when you start your own business. So multiple examples, right? Since we started Use, right? Like we had the opportunity to go to Y Combinator. We ultimately decided not to go. Obviously, like there's implications on the good sides and the bad sides of that, but like you need to make a decision, right? You cannot just sit on that opportunity. Um, but the most important decision for us of the last 3 years was deciding to switch from direct to consumer to B2B, right? And and in a way, it was lucky for us. But you also the preparation needs to meet luck, right? So that we we ha- we decided to build internally a tool for our original business, right? Like the direct to consumer. In the process of building that internal tool, we actually built something that was could actually be productized and sold to the enterprise. That process of actually pivoting from B2C to B2B is not something that you just do overnight, right? Like it's a careful process of communicating to all stakeholders, your investors, your employees, your co-founder, and your customers, right? And tell them, hey, we're going in this direction. This is why. Explain it well, and you need to be even multiple times more. Uh, I think the degree of conviction needs to be much higher because you're going in a direction that originally was not anticipated, right? So I think that there's a process of like really set certain gotta believes, and at the same time set a timeline to make that decision, right? Because otherwise, you're going to be in research mode forever. And going back to the point that I was trying to make, right? It's you we get paid to make decisions, and making those decisions as informed as possible is important, but also like making it in a timely fashion is also important.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, having to make a decision, and I kind of want to expand upon a few things you said there. Number one, you're talking about, having your values or having a goal, and then setting kind of a time frame for those. And so maybe you have a system and a plan, or maybe you don't. But when you're approaching these decisions, how do you kind of work through it? You mentioned communicating with everybody on various different levels, but do you make like a pro and con list? Do you try to figure out what lines up with your values more, and try to make decisions based on that? How do you kind of approach the decisions and ultimately decide what to do?
It's kind of like there's like this quote attributed to Keynes, right? Like when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, right? Like, and the facts change for us, right? Like we realized that our customers were asking us for something different, right? They were much more interested in our technology than in us selling them loans. So there's a combination of like market forces and a combination of also conviction, right? Because market forces might pull you into into a different direction, but if that direction is a very small market, maybe you're like, hey, like this is pretty niche, right? And we're a venture-backed business. We're swinging from the fences, right? So like that's a distraction. But in this case, like the market is pretty sizable, right? Then we looked at this space and we thought, hey, like there's a real opportunity for us to have a differentiated product. There's a playbook of a specific uh, ideal customer profiles that we can speak to, and the contracts are of this size. The dynamics work, and like in essence, what you do is you try to actually sign customers with a beta of the product, right? Like or version of the product that it's that and you tell those customers, hey, like this is what we're going to build for you. This is the timeline. We're going to deliver on that timeline. And as you kind of build that, that's kind of some people. There's plenty of the written about this, right? But if people want your product even before the product is finalized, I think it's pretty telling, and they're willing to pay for that. I think it's pretty telling on like the quality incumbents, right? Obviously, what in a market like ours in which they're incumbents, you need to be also respectful of the fact that they built the track record and grateful to some extent, right? Because they price the market, they set the standard, and like you can benchmark against that, and you need to be significantly better than them, right? Because otherwise, no one the gravity the inertia will not move in your direction.
Sure, yeah, yeah. You're kind of watching what's happening and taking in the facts and then responding accordingly. Like you said, if people are interested in what you're doing, then continue with it, or if they're not, maybe make a pivot or make a change. But I can see how that would definitely impact decisions you're making on multiple different levels. And speaking of that, we're in a huge digital transformation age. And I think it's causing a seismic shift not only in the banking industry, but in basically every industry that there is. And so, in your opinion, how is this, digital transformation kind of reshaping traditional banking or lending practices? And as you already said, how does Fuse kind of fit into that as things start to change and evolve?
I mean, now it's kind of probably like electrification was 150 or something years ago, right? Like it's this process or like what happened with the internet. It's you need to be de facto embracing it, right? Because otherwise you're good. The way that we see the market, right? Like when you think about like how lenders win, they win by either like the quality of service or rate, right? And the big folks have the rate advantage. They just have more efficient operate, like just the scale to like charge lower rates. But the newcomers have much better service. So it's how do you and they are being able to grow at a healthier clip precisely because of that, right? So you cannot rest on your back and think like, oh, I have the best rate in the market and people are going to bend over backwards to get this. If they you do not have the capabilities to push your rate advantage, you're going to fall behind, right? So the same thing happens across the spectrum. I think in financial services, it's people are expecting a kind of Uber or DoorDash experience to the acquisition of credit products, right? Like or investment products. And although it's much more regulated, uh, the tools are there and they should be adopted in a as soon as possible because otherwise, of course, you need to be careful and like make sure that it's compliant and all of that. But assuming all that checks out, the customer itself is starting to dictate that pace, right? And if they don't see that in your organization, they're going to quickly move in that direction. And open banking and all this other kind of like processes that happen in parallel are just going to accelerate that risk of erosion for the incumbents. So what we try to do is like we try to help the entire industry move forward, right? Like it's not that we're cheering for one or the other. It's more like we're cheering for the customer and ultimately cheering for like people serve like the financial institutions serving those customers in a much more uh, uh, like in a faster way and a way that delights them.
Absolutely, yeah, and like I said, trying to incorporate this digital technology and the change of all that stuff. It's been around for a while, but it is always rapidly shifting. I think you can kind of look at it a couple of ways, and we can see how people and how this is affecting them. And one way is you might be scared of it, or you might be unsure of how to what to do with it, and so you kind of avoid it because you don't want anything to do with it. Or you can look at it another way where you say, hey, I can clearly see that this is making a change. It's having an effect. Let me see how it works. Let me figure out more about it. Let me use it as a tool rather than something to kind of to stay away from. And we can see that people who use that as a tool are much more in touch or much more in tune with what's happening as things begin to change. And to your point, it helps you to better service people because you're using an effective tool that is constantly changing and up to date, as opposed to, being stubborn and trying to do things the quote unquote old way. And that
Yeah.
can give you that, that competitive advantage and that helpful boost when you're dealing in these climates, I think.
Yeah, and I think what sometimes we're like scared of new technology. I mean, it's rooted on past experiences and all of that, but at the same time, it's a trade-off. You're making a conscious choice to be slower, and by definitionally, like uh, by not adopting technology, you're making a choice to be worse at certain things too, right? So you, if you think, hey, like I'm gonna be bad at this if I adopt this, or like I don't know how it's gonna be. At the same time, you're making that choice to already like have that shortcoming, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for people to not, that they're scared of adopting new technologies that by definition, by not doing it, they're already like uh, kind of putting themselves at a disadvantage too. It's the choice to like not operate more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is changing so rapidly, especially in fintech, financial technology. And so, as you just said there, I can imagine you encountered a few challenges when you're trying to introduce some of this innovative solution. And I'm just curious how you kind of navigated those, trying to sell people on this technology and sell people on these new ideas that might be kind of unsure with the changes that are happening.
I mean, the biggest challenge is the fact that they are engaged in like super long contracts, right? So in those cases, you just need to invest in the relationship, right? And you create value for them over time, and you when the moment is right, like you kind of engage in a way that it's constructive and value added for them, right? Like, and it's classic enterprise kind of business development, right? It's you create value, create value, and for X amount of interactions of creating value, so you can actually perhaps offer your solution. But for folks that are ready to buy, I think that a consultative approach, partner, a way that you kind of listen to them and not just sell them like a box that they install at home. What we sell to them is it's something that's a pretty important piece of technology, right? So making sure that it incorporates all the internal know-how that works out of the gates, and that it really requires minimal training for them to adopt, is very important, right? Like one of the things that I always think kind of well, note on certain technology, right? That when people talk about like, oh, we have all these training materials, and we'll make sure that all that you have access to the resources to like your workforce to learn something. And the first thing that comes to my mind is like they're outsourcing the simplicity to you, meaning if there's a lot of training materials, it just means that the technology is pretty difficult to use, right? Like imagine having to train to use your Facebook or Instagram or your TikTok. That product will die, right? Like so the same thing for enterprise. It should be simple enough that someone at a junior entry level position doesn't have to be trained, right? That they can actually add value. You need to minimize the barriers of not having to have like technical teams running it, right? Like not everyone can have a PhD from MIT. It's important to kind of recognize the fact that most people are not technical. So technology should reflect that, right? Not make it, not create this barrier, but if anything, just completely bring down that barrier and make it easy to understand for all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think taking that approach and making it easy for everyone to kind of interact with it is one thing that's going to help you to continue to be successful. And, the industry itself is dynamic. There's constantly emerging trends that are reshaping what's going on. And maybe, as you just said, the idea of all this training and kind of outsourcing some of that stuff may be one of those trends. But I'm sure that there are also more exciting and transformative trends that are happening. Do you anticipate or see any trends, on the rise now, and how do you think that will change in the coming years?
I mean, there's the normal kind of like big buzz ones when you think about AI, uh, and all kind of like things like that. But I would say like the advent of like low code, no code in the last 10 years, I think that's a super powerful one, right? Because um, when you think about like 80s and 90s, you lived in a world of zeros and ones. Then like code became a little more understandable. And like just little by little, you're democratizing the way that you understand code and the way that like you actually interact with technology. And that combined with AI tools, much better interfaces, better customization. I think that in itself is going to be very interesting what happens over the next 5 years. That as it pertains to financial technology, the customization of loan offers, um, adaptability of rate, just just better credit card products, better like buy now pay later products. There's a lot of innovation that I see happening on the sidelines, and I'm just very excited to be playing and like betting on the space as a whole.
Yeah, and it's cool you bring up the low code or no code kind of thing that you're talking about there, because until I did some research on you, I'd never heard or thought about that. And I'm being someone who doesn't know anything about code, but incorporating that into Fuse, I think is a great way to help enhance the lending experience for the institutions and the borrowers. And I think it's something that will set Fuse apart. And do you have any other outstanding, specific features that you think set Fuse apart from other
Yeah,
innovations and other products?
I think self-serving tools are pretty important, right? Like I am a lot of like the incumbents in the space. I mean, they were the new kids on the block at some point, right? And the technology was pretty hot when they came, right? It's not so it's just a product of just maturity. Um, and the way that the product was built originally, like now requires to have a lot of like consulting and professional services attached to it. What does that mean? That every time that something needs to be changed, you're talking with their engineering teams instead of like allowing your engineering teams or your business teams to make the changes. So for us, the thesis here is that there's an opportunity to do away with that, and that's low code, no code tools. Where let's say you need to change certain rules within your underwriting criteria. You don't need to like hire the engineers of Fuse to do that. You can do it yourself, and the most beautiful thing is that you don't need to be an engineer, right? That removing that barrier, I think it's super exciting in terms of uh, level the playing field, allowing the smaller lenders, like the regional lenders, to like not spend a ton of money or like completely be uh, uh moved away or not being able to like be as proactive on their lending approach because it's just too expensive to engage consultants. So for us, it's like, hey, like you can actually analyze the data and do it in a way that you can be a proactive lender instead of a reactive lender.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a advantage that you can offer to other people. And throughout the whole conversation, you're talking, you're trying to make it easier, more efficient. You're trying to make it dynamic and kind of user friendly. And I think that's again all things that are going to set Fuse apart from other software, other company, other services. And it's great to hear that it's working so well for you. And I think it's because you have a clear vision of what you want, and you have you're using the tools and things that you can to make that happen, and you have everyone's best interest in mind, and that's awesome to hear. But I want to take a minute and kind of go back and maybe look at a different side of things. So obviously you're co-founder of Fuse, which is a title that comes with a lot of history and past and work that went into that mission there. So, as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of curious, what strategies and mindsets do you consider essential for startups and people that are trying to champion innovations in not only the financial world but in general? What strategies do you have for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is like be ready to there's nothing beneath you, right? Like, so I think that a lot of people think that it's like this fancy thing that like you're just doing hot stuff, and reality is you're just doing a lot of the stuff that like you will do in your regular job, and even stuff that you did as a very junior person, right? Or like even that you never did, right? So you need to be a jack of all trades in the very beginning. I think as the organization starts gathering steam, you need to start learning how to delegate and although like and bring in talent. So I think it's very important to like aside from building a fantastic product, you need to be able to inspire not only like your clients, but your employees themselves are clients of you in a way, right? Because they buy the idea that what you're building is hopefully going to be a rocket ship, right? So in my case, I think that the thing you need to nurture the most is your ability, like to like be persuasive. But like the first person you need to really persuade from the very beginning is yourself, right? Like, and you cannot trick yourself into something, right? Like my grandfather always said, like you can lie to others, but not to yourself. And I think when you in the early days of setting up the idea and like planting that seed, you you need to build a conviction. You need to spend a little of your own resources, or you're bootstrapping a lot of your resources into like building the conviction that you want to spend time on this because most startups will fail, right? So you need very spending like a proper amount of time, a defined timeline to it, then going back to the idea of like defined timelines. Otherwise, you're just going to messing around for years and never really find the idea. Just set a timeline in which you think you want to come up with idea and like go for it. And once you're convinced, really go at it, right? Because and then once you gain conviction, you can actually start hiring people. You can start convincing co-founders. You can start convincing investors. You can start convincing clients, partners, and all of that. But the first person you need to buy in from is yourself, and being able to like tell that narrative to others is very important.
Yeah, it's hard I imagine it's hard to put all the work into something like that if you don't actually believe, in what you're doing. And so, like you said, convincing yourself of the value and the merit and the importance of that is paramount. And then being able to transfer that to other people and bring them on board is huge. And, as we're talking, you're very obviously a well-rounded, as you said, jack of all trade. And I'm just curious personally, I imagine you probably have what we call or consider the constant and never ending improvement mindset, meaning you're always looking for new ways to learn. You're always trying to look at different views of everything. And so I'm wondering, in your personal life, what do you do to help foster that? What kind of books do you read? Do you listen to other podcasts, to watch videos? How do you consider, or how do you go about continuing to learn
Yeah.
every day?
No, definitely like the curiosity is intense, but like I mean, I have no idea how to compare myself to others. What I can share with you is that I've always been fascinated by the whole concept of the fox and the hedgehog, right? And I think in my prior life when I was an investor, the fox is kind of like defined as like very little about a lot of things, right? And the hedgehog just knows a lot about one thing. Kind of it's very deep, but the breadth is very little, right? So I do think that like for the first 10 years of my career or so or more, I was a fox. And that once you become an entrepreneur, like, you kind of need to become a hedgehog, right? It's I can talk about like loan origination systems for hours, but you probably don't want to talk about origination systems for more than an hour and a half, right? So it's the that's something that like I recognize that like I've seen that transition in my life from a professional standpoint. Like my day to day is just this piece of technology that's very important, but it's among a bunch of other things that my clients need. So it's very important to kind of elevate that importance to them, and that's my job. But aside from work, and kind of like to complement, you were asking what do I like to read? I like to read all sorts of things. I try to keep a good balance of fiction and nonfiction. My sister criticizes me all the time for not reading enough nonfiction, but I like from Russian novels to like just more contemporary, like Norwegian writers or like Latin American literature. I try to keep that in the mix, but I think as you start a business, that kind of starts your ability to like read a book a week. It kind of completely dwindles, right? Like so you kind of defect much more to like do one book a month, but like you become an avid consumer of certain podcast channels or newspapers, right? The things that I've never stopped to consume is like a healthy mix of like the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the Economist, right? Obviously, it's just informed by my obsession with finance. Um, I will never be reading like any other news sources other than that. Like that's although I consume other, but not that's those are probably one of the few kind of like newspapers I read when I want opinion. When I don't want opinion, I just read Reuters, right? Like Reuters is just news, so I try to do that. And podcasts, it's just a wide array. From I like this. Like there's this guy called Rush Roberts. He can talk. Love that guy. It's um, very I would call it a very libertarian point of view, but like just very interesting. He seems to me like a very fair guy when it comes to interviews. And well, of course, like Lex Friedman is pretty interesting these days. And I also waste my time watching some stand-up comedy. Like while you're getting ready for your day, you also need some light stuff. And never underestimate the power of listening to stuff at one and a half or 2x. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. It's great to hear, I really appreciate your perspective of it because, Mr. Bean, Chris and I, we kind of view things differently sometimes. And so where he's always reading fiction and he always is doing what he calls studying and learning, which I admire.
Nonfiction.
Oh, reading nonfiction and stuff like that, and always studying and bettering himself. Sometimes I like to kick back with a fiction book. Is that fiction, right? Yeah, fiction book, and kind of enjoy myself. But I think, like you're saying there, the main point is that when you are reading some things, it's pertinent or helpful to what you're doing. You're reading the journals that and the studies and things that are important to your world. You're listening to podcasts that are important to your world. But then, like I said, I like that you have the balance of, getting ready for the day, listen to a stand-up comic or listening to something that you enjoy. And balance is very important as well. As much as we want to strive to better ourselves, I think it's understated that, you can take some time to enjoy something or make that part of the the kind of the cycle, the routine. So I appreciate your insight in that as well.
And, I have to say, I admire that you listen to your information at one time or one and a half time or 2 times speed, because always continually I'm on 2 times speed, and somebody will, I'll show somebody a video like, why are they talking so fast? Or I'll have it on the TV and my kid will, what is going on? And because all of the time I'm consuming my YouTube videos at 2 times speed, just because I guess even podcasts, you slowly start to ramp up that speed. And then when you listen to it in standard, 1 time, it seems like they're talking in slow motion. Like, I can't just give me the information already. Come on now.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing that I might have to admit, I do not listen the audiobooks for like nonfiction. So sorry, for fiction, I need to read that, see the paper. Like, whereas a biography on someone, I think you can listen to that. But like just a good novel, there's the beauty of you putting your own voice and like really imagine a character. Of course it varies on the person, but for me, like that's the only thing that I haven't been able to cross that bridge in terms of the listening to fiction on an audiobook and enjoying it.
Yeah, I agree. I typically listen to fiction and build that world in my head. But you were telling me recently about what is the term for it? It's like the scripted, not the scripted podcast, but it's like.
Yeah, it's a scripted podcast where it's almost, so they have podcasts, and sometimes they do this with books too, but they have voice actors that go and play the role, and so you're essentially listening to like an old time radio show, but it's a podcast. It's like a movie, as if you couldn't see what was going on, but there's sound effects, there's different voice actors. And when I do listen to those, I have to listen to them in standard time, because I don't want to miss out on the timing if there's supposed to be a pause or for dramatic effect or whatever it is. So I have to listen to those on standard time. But yeah, the scripted podcast, I think, would be the correct term for that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like the audiobooks. Like if I was to listen to a fiction audiobook, I'd want one that had different voice actors, background kind of stuff, kind of to really get you into that world, to your point. But I guess we're kind of digressing a little bit. But
I mean, just that, like some random thought there. There's nothing as far as when you're driving, especially like cross country in the US, and you put NPR and it's like classical music, and there's always this lady who has that voice. Like, it has to be the most soothing voice in America. I don't even know who that is, but this is Brahms concerto, and you're like, wow, just continue describing.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, well, Andres, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your incredible journey of Fuse and everything that you've learned with our audience today. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or key takeaways that you want to share with us?
Well, I had like amazing mentors through my career, right? So if someone is, if I can pay forward and the way that I was helped through all these years via my parents, friends, family, and just colleagues, just reach out via LinkedIn. I'll try my best to make time. And I think that's pretty important, because you never know it's how you can help others.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is that the best place for listeners to find out more about you, LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best avenue.
Okay, awesome. Very good. Well, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Prestigious Initiative. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Until next time, keep thriving and innovating.